What is infinite banking? Infinite banking is about how you can take back control and benefit from the opportunity and profitability of the banking function in your life. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. Today I want to tell you what infinite banking is. So let's go right to the source. There was a man named R. Nelson Nash who conceived, codified, implemented, and then eventually taught and mentored others on how to re-ascertain the banking function in their lives. He brought banking back to the me and the you level. He wrote a book. It's essentially the manual. It's the original source material of how to become your own banker. It's called Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash, Unlocking the Infinite Banking Concept. So I never had the personal opportunity to meet R. Nelson Nash, much to my regret, but I benefit from his written works. He wrote a second book called Building Your Warehouse of Wealth, also on the infinite banking concept. And today there is still a Nelson Nash Institute. You can go to infinitebanking.org to find out more about that institute that is perpetuated past his, what he would call his graduation. Okay, he would say there's this life and then there's another one. And just like he would say, if you'd like to have a conversation about that, I also am open to having a conversation about that with you. But that's the man who came up with the idea. And it's just so amazing to me that here in North Carolina, I was able to read that book and implement this process. Now, he would tell us that to consider the infinite banking concept, we have to recognize that this will be then, this mental exercise is going to be an exercise to just even consider becoming our own bankers. It's an exercise in imagination, reason, logic, and prophecy. Now, he would say that imagination was the most important of those. He would quote Einstein. I will as well, that imagination is more important than knowledge. That's from Einstein, a legitimate, verifiable genius. And he would go on to say that reason and that logic, and you can see that when you're reading his book to answer that question for you of what is infinite banking. When you read that book, you listen to his reason, you listen to his logic. And then, of course, prophecy, because it's worthwhile to consider what has happened in the past and then therefore be able to deduce what may happen in the future. It seems that history has this process of repeating itself. There's a chapter in his second book, Building Your Warehouse of Wealth, where he talks about out of Egypt into Babylon. And he's talking about that very fact of history repeating itself. So it's worth noticing. But this whole discussion is going to be an exercise in imagination. Our imagination, your imagination, is going to go through an exercise just to consider the fact that you could become your own banker if you choose to. So it'll be an exercise in imagination, reason, logic, prophecy. Now, banking is a function. Banking exists. Banking is. Okay, so we can't answer the question of what is infinite banking if we don't talk about just banking. And let's look at the word. Okay, bank. Food bank, river bank, snow bank. What does that imply? Well, that there's just an accumulation of whatever that thing is. A food bank has a lot of food at it. So when we talk about conventional banking, commercialized banking, don't we just deposit all our cash flows and incomes at the conventional commercial bank? Right. And that's where it's stored. That's where it's accumulated. And it's worthwhile asking who owns that entity where we're depositing our money. Okay. But banking, it's the depositing, it's the loaning of capital. Okay. Money, just money being a means of exchange. Banks are what they are. They're in your town corners. They're in my town corners. They're the nice. Also, side note, no, not so side note. Aren't they the nicest buildings and the nicest parts of town with the best kept grounds? Okay. Who pays for that? Good question. But that's banks, and banks perform banking. Okay, we've abdicated our responsibility and opportunity to the commercial, conventional banking system. Nash's book is about how you can become your own banker. You can reacquire the banking function and account for it and profit from it yourself. Now, Nelson does tell us that to be successful in this journey of becoming your own banker, to be successful at infinite banking, we must address the human problems, because we're bringing ourselves into the equation, of course. So he gives the human problems as Parkinson's law, Willie Sutton's law, the golden rule, the arrival syndrome, and use it or lose it. Let's start with Parkinson's law. Parkinson had this law that says that when we're given a time envelope to perform a task, we normally use that whole time. Whether we needed that full time or not, we use it. That's just our human tendency. That's our human nature. Also, we tend to spend what we earn. That's just our human nature. So, and he had Parkinson's first for a reason. If we don't conquer Parkinson's, there's no need for us to continue this discussion. Okay? We must conquer Parkinson's daily. We must learn to live on less than we earn. Okay? Let's keep going. Willie Sutton's law. Wherever wealth is accumulated, someone will try and steal it. Willie Sutton was a bank robber, infamous bank robber. Wherever we accumulate or amass wealth, someone will try and steal it, legally or illegally. That's a worthy note right there. Okay? So again, looking at banking, we got to consider where we put our capital. Then there's the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. He who has the gold makes the rules. That's so very powerful to consider, because conventionally we're told to put our money somewhere else for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years and not touch it. Okay, so we're missing out on a lot right there. Even for my cash is king folks that are going to tell me, Jesse, well, I pay cash for everything. Good, that's better than conventionally financing. But when you pay cash, aren't you missing? Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're about to get. No, let me just focus on principle. Let me focus at least on the principle right here. Okay, what if you could do something more than just spend the money? But if you could spend the money. Okay, because I'm not saying don't spend money. Well, I spend money on things. You're going to spend money on things. But what if you could spend money and get it back? Okay, now let's keep going. The fourth is the arrival syndrome. This is perhaps the most dangerous. This is the part that's perhaps the hardest to overcome, Nash would say, in talking with folks about their opportunity to become their own banker, is the arrival syndrome. That sense of, well, I know it all. I know it all. I know everything. That sense of arrival. I don't need help. I don't need to know more. I know enough. Okay. Around here in the country, we have sayings. I've had friends that'll say, you can't push a dead bear up a tree. Perhaps you've heard you can lead a horse to water, can't make it drink. Scripture says, cast not your pearls before swine. Okay. So if someone is in that arrival syndrome, okay, there's no point in going any further, okay, because you know it all already. Okay, but I don't believe that's you. We're listening, we're talking, we're having this discussion right now. And then the last is use it or lose it. See, we all have an opportunity to use our capital for whatever it is that we're already doing and get it back. The banking function exists. Use it or lose it. Bury your money in a hole in the ground. Are you assuming risk? Is it compounding? Are you missing out on interest? Should you be considering EVA, economic value added? Should you be considering that capital has a cost? Yes. Okay, so maybe not a hole in the ground. Savings account, checking account, you still got to ask the same questions. What exposure am I taking here? Am I open to litigation, taxation, inflation, a lot of the shuns? Okay. Am I missing out on interest that I could otherwise be earning? Okay. And then you just got to keep asking yourself about, okay, well, where should this be amassed? Where should this be put where I can maintain control, where I can compound it? Okay. Because if you don't use it, you will lose it. And we're told not to use it. We're told to put money somewhere in various places, 10, 20, 30, 40 years and not touch it. If you don't use it, you will lose it. It's just a human problem. We all have to address these 5 human problems. Parkinson's law, Willie Sutton's law, the golden rule, the arrival syndrome, and use it or lose it. Next, Nelson had these principles when implementing the infinite banking concept. He would say, you've got to think long range. Okay. The longer range we can think, the better off we are. Okay. He worked in forestry in a prior career. So my go-to example here is, when would you like to have a tree planted? Well, 30 years ago, because you could enjoy its fruit today, its shade today, etc. Okay. But when's the next best time? Well, today. All right. So we need to be looking that way in the future as well. Okay. Our next generation, what if we could set up our generation differently than we started from? Okay. So if you're not thinking long range, you're going to be holding yourself back. His second principle was, don't be afraid to capitalize. Now, this is a big one. This is an important one. That's why it's one of the cornerstone principles from Nash, because if we look at this journey of becoming our own banker as starting a new business, there's going to be a capitalization phase. There's not going to be a loss of value, okay? When we begin acquiring properly structured whole life policies with mutual companies that pay dividends, there's not going to be, every premium dollar can compound forever into the future, uninterrupted. Tax-free. So we can't be afraid to capitalize. We need to look at it as a business where there's not going to be a loss of value. There may be, there in fact will be, and I say may because it could look different for different folks. That's why I start by describing that entity as a properly structured policy. Okay, so it matters who you work with. Luckily for you, I know a qualified individual. So we can't be afraid to capitalize. There's not going to be a loss of value, but there will be a loss of liquidity. Now, even in the beginning of a policy, even in year one, first year, brand new policy, you can access the vast majority of the amount of premiums that have been paid. And it's a beautiful thing. And all that policy does is get more and more efficient over the course of time. So again, thinking about that tree example, there's a capitalization phase. When would you like that? When you know that there's going to be this constant upward growth trend of death benefit, of cash value, compounding your capital into the future, when would you want that to start? So the third principle is, don't do business with banks. Don't do business with banks. They're printing money. They're digitizing digits on a screen for loans that they're making to us in our communities, and then charging interest on that. Nash would say that it's evil. And you and I can't do that. That would be illegal. Yeah, we cannot be printing money. Okay, we cannot be writing loans for money that doesn't exist. And of course, mutual life insurance companies operate very differently in that particular regard than the conventional banking system, where the banking system is lending out multiples of the dollars that are kept there, that are deposited there. The insurance companies operate based on the premium dollars that have been paid and the growth of their assets, etc. So if we're doing business with banks, Nash would say we are part of the problem. So again, in just answering this question of what is infinite banking? Infinite banking for the practitioner means that they're thinking long range. To be successful, anyway, to be successful, we're thinking long range. We're not afraid to capitalize. We're not doing business with a conventional commercial banking system. If we are, we're part of the problem. Next, we're going to be an honest banker ourselves. So banking exists. We can be performing the banking function for ourselves, and we can do that honestly or dishonestly. This is where his famous grocery store example comes into play. And I encourage you, of course, to read Nelson's Becoming Your Own Banker book to understand that very important analogy, because we can decide to be honest or dishonest. It is a principle to be an honest banker if you want to be successful. And there are lots of great examples. He picks one, First Bank, Midland, Texas, and he describes that situation that happened there from dishonest banking. So it behooves us, and whose banking system are we even talking about? Let's keep things in perspective here. We're talking about a privatized banking system that you will own and control. Who do you want to be profitable with your banking system? Yourself, of course. So don't steal the peace. Be an honest banker. And then the last one is rethink your thinking. Fighting that arrival syndrome that we mentioned earlier. Again, being open to rethinking your thinking. We all bring lots of experiences and ideas and propaganda and sayings to the table here. And we just need to be open to rethinking those things. It's a good question to ask. How do you know that? Will Rogers famously said, the problem in America isn't so much what Americans don't know, but it's what we think we know that just ain't so. So when we think we know things, but it's not actually that way, that's a problem. So his fifth principle to being successful in implementing the infinite banking concept is to rethink our thinking. Now, with knowing what the source material is on how to become your own banker, in knowing that it's going to be an exercise in our imagination, our reason, our logic, and prophecy to even consider such an idea, knowing that we're going to have to confront the human problems of Parkinson's law, Willie Sutton's law, the golden rule, the arrival syndrome, use it or lose it. We're going to have to confront those human problems. And then also, thankfully, Nash gave us these principles on how to be successful in implementing the infinite banking concept by thinking long range, by not being afraid to capitalize, by not doing business with banks, by being an honest banker ourselves, and by rethinking our thinking. Here's where the rubber meets the road. You need to be able to talk to a qualified professional, someone who has actually implemented personally in their lives this infinite banking concept for themselves. They can't help you if they're not doing it themselves. I've done this. I believe that I can help everybody that reaches out to me. So if you're already a client, thank you. I hope that you're enjoying this episode. And if you're vetting this idea of what the infinite banking concept is, we're going about the business of becoming our own bankers by acquiring properly structured whole life policies with mutual companies that pay dividends. And with this self-collateralizing, appreciating asset, we're going to bank for ourselves privately. And there are 16 characteristics to this particular entity that I've just described, and Nash has a chapter in his book called Creating the Entity. Okay. I'll put up information here about the episode where I go over 16 characteristics of an ideal asset. But we're going to use this asset to privatize our banking. And then over the course of our lifetime, it'll look like this. We will build a system of policies that we own and control to eventually account for our entire need of finance, such as it is in our household, in our business, or in our investing, whatever it is that we're doing now and whatever it is that we will be doing. We're going to build a system to where eventually our income will be equal to the premiums that we pay. And then, of course, when you take into account that you earn dividends, then you're actually paying more premiums than you even have income, which is an amazing concept. And Nash would also say that it might take the average person 20 years. Okay. Now, it might take you longer. It might take you shorter. Okay. My wife and I, we've been on this journey for 8 years now. We own multiple policies with multiple companies. We've used our system of policies, and everyone in our family has a policy, at least one policy on them. We own 6 policies at this point in time. And we've used our policies for paying off student loans, paying off a car, financing family vacations, lots of things that I've talked about here. And we're just systematically going about the business of building a system of policies that will account for our intergenerational need of finance. And we've done that by starting without having to change our cash flows or work any harder or assume any additional risk or lose any control from getting our very first policy. And we've stayed educated. I still read Nash's books, reread Nash's books. Of course, we have a plethora of information here on our podcast and our channels. So what I would encourage you to do is to consider, where do you warehouse your wealth? Where are you putting your wealth? I would ask you to consider, who controls the banking function in your life? And then if you are thinking long range, I want to know if it matters to you what kind of a legacy you leave and set up for the next generations. So if you would, let me know your biggest takeaway down in the comments section below. And if you'd like to have a conversation about how to implement the infinite banking concept into your household or your business or your investing, then don't hesitate to reach out to us. I look forward to that conversation. This has been a great pleasure for me. I hope you have a great day. Take care. Hello!
Hey, you plotting on me, boy? My name is Optimus Prime.
Oh, yes, I do.
Is it sweet? Is it juicy?
I'm a real boy.
Can Elmo do that?
Arr! And in this corner, we have infinite banking!
Infinite banking. Infinite banking. Infinite banking.
Infinite banking!
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking. Banking? Infinite.
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking. Infinite banking.
Infinite banking.
Infinite banking.
That's too silly. That one's too much. It's close. A little rusty.